All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to talk about two of the main important ways that Python represents numbers. And you might be thinking, isn't just a number a number? What's the difference? And in the real world, a number is a number. 1 is a number, negative 20 is a number, 57.775 is a number. And in Python, while those things are all numbers, they are stored or represented differently. And it all comes down to saving space in memory. Remember that everything that we do, whether it's numbers or words or more complex data, it all gets turned into ones and zeros and it's stored in memory. And the thing is that a decimal number, like we have on the right here, 6.1 or 1.3333, takes up a lot more space, or potentially takes up a lot more space than a simple whole number. Because let's take the numbers 0 and 1. All right, so if we're working with whole numbers, there's one number, or maximum of two numbers between 0 and 1. We have 0 and we have 1. But if we're talking about decimals, all of a sudden there's an infinite number of numbers between 0 and 1. So Python has to account for that. In memory, it takes up a lot more space to kind of save room for any potential decimals that could come after. And Python won't store, an infinite number of decimal points. It does eventually start to lose accuracy, but it's generally not a problem unless you need extreme precision. So actually, there are 4 data types of numbers. There's another one called complex, another one called long, but it's really, really rare that you would need to know about that, let alone use them. The 2 important ones are integer and floating point. Okay, so it all comes down to space. Now, integers are whole numbers, positive or negative. 4, 57, negative 10, negative 3,000, 9 million, whatever it is. Floating points, on the other hand, also positive or negative, but they have decimals after them. So even if it's a whole number like 1.0, if it has that 0.0, it's a floating point. 6.1, 1.33333, all floating points. And you'll often hear people refer to them as floats. Those people include me. So when I say float, I'm just referring to numbers that are floating points that have decimals versus an integer is a whole number. So integers take up less space, floating points take up more space. Okay, so I'm going to hop over to my terminal. I'm working in a directory that I made called numbers and math. If you want to follow along with the exact same way, I'm not going to make a new file just yet. I'm actually going to open up my Python 3 interpreter, and we can do something really silly like just type a number, and it just gives us back the same number. But what I want to show you is something a bit more advanced. It's called a function. We're not going to discuss it in this section, so just ignore that question in your mind about what a function is. We will get there. But there's a function called type, and we give it a number, or eventually we can give it other types of data, but for now we're working with numbers, like 9, and I hit enter. In between those parentheses, pass in the number, and it will tell me, hey, that's an integer. Don't worry about what this class thing is. We'll get to that as well. And I can do the same thing, but this time let's do 9.0. And it tells me that's a float. Or we could do 9999999.2. That's a float. Well, 99999 without the 0.2 is an int. Okay, so again, don't worry about what a function is. I just wanted to show you that there's a way to actually discern what type a number is. So now that we've seen the 2 main types of numbers, I want to mention that Python is not just a glorified calculator. That's not what this course is about, but we can use it as one. We can do simple math. We can do 1 plus 1, 5 minus 3, or we could get really fancy and combine a couple numbers and operators, 1 plus 4 minus 2. So I encourage you to play around just for a moment, try some operations. In the next video, I'm going to talk about things like order of operations. I'll show you a couple other operators, but really quickly, let's do something like 1 plus 3. Now here's a question for you. What happens when I do, let's say, 1 plus 1.0? What's the result going to be? And you can see we get 2.0. So rather than just turning it into an integer, if any part of the expression is a float, the end result will be a float. All right, so we can do things like add an integer like 20 and add 0.777 to it, and we get 20.777. I won't bore you with doing a bunch more math, but the key thing I want you to take away here is that when you do math with an integer and a float, Python will give you a float back. So I'll leave it at that for now. Remember, 2 types, integers, whole numbers, floats have decimal points, And that's it. Next up, let's do some simple math.